So, if you haven't watched The Pit Season 2, Episode 11 yet, then I highly recommend that you go and check it out first, because this episode was not just another chapter in the story, but instead, it felt like a culmination of everything that the season has been building towards, an episode that didn't hold back in any sense, whether it was emotionally, narratively, or even visually. And just when it seemed like the show had already pushed its characters to their limits, it somehow managed to go even further, delivering one of the most intense and emotionally layered experiences that we've seen so far. And from the very opening moments, you can feel that something is different. There's a weight to everything that's happening, a sense that every single action and every single decision is carrying consequences that are going to ripple throughout the rest of the story. And what makes this episode stand out is the way it balances multiple storylines at once, without making any of them feel rushed or underdeveloped, instead giving each character their moment while still maintaining a consistent sense of urgency that keeps you completely locked in from start to finish. And one of the biggest reasons for that is the environment itself, because the emergency room is already a place that thrives on chaos
and unpredictability. But in this episode, that chaos is taken to another level, not just because of the number of patients or the severity of their conditions, but because of the emotional states of the people treating them. And this is where the episode truly shines, because it doesn't just show us what's happening on the surface. It dives deep into the psychological impact that all of this has on the doctors and nurses, showing us that they are not just professionals doing a job, but human beings who are constantly being pushed to their breaking points. And that brings us to one of the most devastating moments in the episode, which is the death of Roxy, a moment that was expected, but still managed to hit incredibly hard because of how it was handled. And what the show does so well here is capture the reality of losing someone to a terminal illness. Because even when you know that the end is coming, even when you've had time to prepare yourself mentally, nothing can truly prepare you for the moment when it actually happens. And the way the scene is presented reflects that perfectly, with the silence that follows her passing speaking louder than any words ever could, creating an atmosphere that is both heavy and heartbreaking. And it's in this moment that we see the true impact of her death, not just on her loved ones, but on the doctors as well, particularly Dr. Robbie and Dr. Javadi. Because despite their experience and the countless lives they have seen come and go, moments like this still affect them deeply. And for Dr. Javadi, this is especially significant, because she is still relatively new, and forming emotional connections with patients is something that she hasn't yet learned to fully separate from her professional responsibilities. And seeing her struggle to hold back her emotions, while Dr. Robbie gives her the subtle nod that it's okay to step away if she needs to, is a small but powerful moment that highlights the humanity within the hospital, showing that even in a place driven by urgency and efficiency, there is still room for empathy and understanding. And as that moment lingers, it becomes clear that Roxy's death is not just a standalone emotional beat, but instead the starting point of a much larger emotional unraveling that we see particularly within Dr. Robbie. Because while on the surface he maintains that composed, authoritative presence that we've come to expect from him, underneath that there is clearly something beginning to crack. Something that this episode slowly brings to the surface as he is forced to confront.
Not just the loss in front of him, but also the fear of losing someone close to him in a very similar way. And that overlap between professional detachment and personal vulnerability is what makes his arc in this episode so compelling, because it shows that no matter how much experience someone has, there are always moments that hit too close to home, moments that break through that emotional barrier that doctors often build to protect themselves. And this is something that continues to build as the episode progresses, especially when we see how he reacts to other situations unfolding around him, including the arrival of ICE agents, which introduces a completely different kind of tension into the hospital, one that is not rooted in illness or injury, but in fear, authority, and the imbalance of power. And what makes this storyline particularly impactful is how real it feels, because the presence of ICE doesn't just affect the individual they are there for, but creates a ripple effect throughout the entire hospital, causing patients to feel unsafe, staff to become anxious, and the overall environment to shift from one of care to one of uncertainty. And the way the show presents this is incredibly effective, because it doesn't rely on over-the-top drama, but instead focuses on subtle reactions, on the way people look at each other, on the hesitation in their actions, and on the underlying tension that builds with every passing moment.
Dr. Robbie's confrontation with one of the agents is a perfect example of this, because it shows his willingness to stand up for what is right, even when he knows that it could put him in a difficult position. And this moment reinforces his role not just as a doctor, but as someone who genuinely cares about the people around him, regardless of the circumstances. And alongside this external conflict, we also have the deeply personal storyline of Mel, which in many ways serves as the emotional core of the episode. Because while everything else is happening around her, she is dealing with a crisis that is entirely internal, one that is rooted in her relationship with her sister and the realization that the life she thought she understood is beginning to change in ways that she cannot control. And this is where the writing truly excels, because it takes a situation that might seem simple on the surface, a sister keeping a secret about having a boyfriend, and turns it into something much deeper by exploring what that secret represents, which is independence, growth, and the inevitable reality that people change and move forward, sometimes in ways that leave others behind. And for Mel, this is incredibly difficult to accept because her entire identity has been built around taking care of her sister, around being needed, and around having a clear purpose in her life. So when that purpose begins to slip away, it creates a sense of emptiness that she doesn't know how to fill. And this is something that we see reflected in her interactions throughout the episode.
Particularly in the moments where she expresses her fear of being alone, a fear that feels very real and very raw because it's not just about losing her sister, but about losing the version of herself that existed within that relationship. And what makes this even more impactful is the way other characters respond to her, especially Dana, who provides a grounded and realistic perspective by reminding her that people have their own reasons for keeping secrets, and that those reasons are not always about the person being kept in the dark. And this advice is important because it challenges Mel to look beyond her own feelings and consider the situation from a different angle. But at the same time, it doesn't immediately solve her problem because the fear she is dealing with is much deeper than logic. It's emotional, it's ingrained, and it's something that she is going to have to work through over time. And this is where we start to see her reaching her breaking point, particularly in moments where the stress from her personal life begins to spill over into her professional environment, culminating in confrontations and emotional outbursts that show just how overwhelmed she has become. And this ties into one of the central themes of the episode, which is the idea that everyone is carrying something, whether it's grief, fear, guilt, or internal conflict. And this theme is further explored through the storyline involving the mother and her child,
Which is one of the most heartbreaking arcs in the episode, because it highlights the complexity of human behavior and the fact that not every situation can be easily understood or judged from the outside. And the mother's guilt, her struggle to cope with what has happened, and her reaction to the situation all serve to remind us that people respond to trauma in different ways, sometimes in ways that are difficult to comprehend. And this is reinforced by Dr. Robbie's line about how people don't always respond to trauma the way you expect them to. A statement that not only applies to the mother, but to many of the characters in the episode, including himself. And as we move further into the episode, we also see significant development in Ogilvie's character, which provides a subtle but meaningful shift in tone, because for the first time we see him showing genuine compassion. And this change is not presented as sudden or unrealistic, but as something that comes from experience, from making mistakes, and from being forced to confront the consequences of those mistakes, particularly with Mr. Green. And this growth is important because it adds depth to his character and shows that even those who seem rigid or detached are capable of change when faced with the right circumstances. And this idea of growth, self-reflection, is also present in the conflict between Dr. Santos and Dr. Langdon, which serves as a reminder that not all struggles are external. Some are deeply personal and rooted in past actions, unresolved tension, and differing perspectives on accountability and forgiveness. And while Langdon is clearly trying to move forward and take responsibility for what he has done, Santos remains resistant, holding on to her beliefs and refusing to see things from his point of view, which creates a dynamic that feels both realistic realistic and frustrating, and ultimately adds another layer to the episode's exploration of human relationships. And by the time we reach the final moments of the episode, it becomes clear that this was not just a story about events, but about people, about how they react under pressure, how they deal with loss, how they confront their fears, and how they navigate the complexities of their lives, both inside and outside the hospital. And in my opinion, this is what makes this episode stand out as one of the best of the season, because it manages to balance all of these elements in a way that feels authentic, engaging, and emotionally impactful, leaving us with a deeper understanding of the characters and a strong sense of anticipation for what is to come next as the season moves toward its conclusion.